All right, so this is going to really go over COVID-19 and essential business in DFW. Primarily, this is going to be focused around Dallas County as well as Collin County, because those are primarily, where our clients are or what we're facing. So, this is the overall. So if you'll notice, I have the vegetation, the restaurant theme, because I think everybody's talking about to-go orders and takeout and how restaurants somehow became this essential service because we can no longer cook for ourselves. And even if the grocery stores are open and have food, well, it's too much of a burden to ask people to still cook or prepare meals at home. So I just thought that was funny, but you'll notice the food theme throughout. So what are we governed by? It's a mismatch of local, state, and federal regulations. Federal, luckily so far, we haven't had a lot of rulings or federal mandates, nothing regarding essential business or what it means for each state. But we have some of that PPP and CARES Act that is helping. And it does have some interaction with the local people in terms of who has money to stay open, and how that might influence state and local regulation. So at the statewide level, Texas has been a little bit unique. They were very slow to come out with a statewide proclamation or an order, as opposed to some of the states like California or Washington State. They were quick to do very broad blanket rulings that impacted a lot of people that, maybe were in rural areas and it didn't really make sense. But now we are. So Governor Abbott has announced those types of things. He has described essential businesses can stay open. He hasn't given any detailed definition, but it's a state of emergency. It's a disaster zone. We've declared that, but he's largely delegated that or relegated the local counties or cities to regulate how they want to enforce this, COVID-19 crisis. So that brings me to the last point, which is local. Local city and county government, they're going to control the physical people and businesses and homes inside of their jurisdiction. And I think that's important to understand because for so many of our businesses, they cross county lines. And so we have already a natural disconnect between Dallas County, which has been really active. They put out a ton of information. They have lots of detailed documents. They put out frequent updates. They're tweeting about it, and that's Dallas. On the other hand, Collin has been very slow, and they've been pretty reluctant to enforce or enact similar measures that Dallas County has. So again, I just think it's interesting, the contradiction or the juxtaposition of these two counties who are adjacent. Maybe they have a different business makeup, but they're very, very different in how they are approaching the county regulation of this. So what has been announced? I'm going to kind of start reverse chronological because this stuff is updating every single day, and this is I had to update this slide. Yesterday, Dallas County has banned short-term rentals. So no owner of real property can rent out a room for less than 30 days. And that's basically their definition. That's a short-term rental, and you just can't do it. They've put out additional guidance for long-term care facilities. That's like senior living, assisted living, and it starts to go into a little bit of home health care. Basically, there are certain rights and prohibitions. And again, this is a case I've actually seen, or I've had it, come across my desk, was a sick person was in a hospital, this elderly lady, and she was going to be discharged, but she had to go to a rehab. She had to go to like a skilled nursing or some type of rehab facility overnight. And they wouldn't admit her without proof that she was COVID-19 negative. I mean, obviously, we've seen all of the risks that seniors housing and that tight, confined space can transmit very rapidly and very deadly in seniors living. So I can understand their hesitation, but it put this particular person or resident in a bit of a bind, because at that time, this was like a week ago, couldn't get testing, didn't necessarily have symptoms, so they weren't a priority for getting the COVID testing, but they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't go home because the doctor said, you can't live by yourself, you need some care. They couldn't get admitted into one of these facilities because everybody was freaking out and just saying, no, 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 we're not going to allow anybody into our facility if we don't know that they're negative. Which again, that raises a second issue of, okay, how recent does that certificate have to be? Because I could go get tested tomorrow. Let's say I get the results back in a week at best, 5 days. I could easily get infected in the next 3 days. And that's kind of the uselessness of the testing in terms of putting a person into an at-risk population. So anyway, there's just all sorts of clarification and best practices and recommendations, because there is language, from Dallas County saying you cannot discriminate on this basis. You cannot require X, for employees in order for them to work. You cannot require a negative testing of COVID-19, something like that. And again, these have just been scattered throughout, the early parts of April. And it all goes back to the County of Dallas is under a shelter-in-place order until the end of April. Essential businesses and those essential employees, and also by extension, essential employees, childcare workers can also are able to work. So you really have this chain that's flowing from essential businesses, essential employees, essential healthcare, essential residential care, and it's just a growing, spider web. Well, it's a snowball that is really catching a lot of people under. Well, suddenly now I'm essential. What is essential? And the nice thing is that Dallas County has published an FAQ where they list out a lot of different businesses, but they list them out by name. And so we have restaurants, those are essential, but no dine-in, no waiting inside the restaurant. You can pay an order, only takeout and delivery. These people are essential and they have to work. We've expanded that to grocery stores, pharmacies, construction, residential and commercial construction are an essential business. And what the county recommends is that they practice safe social distancing. They cannot require a negative COVID, but they can't test the temperature, but that's something that's going on in China. I talked to one of my clients this week, and they said that in China, it's very interesting. They are out from the lockdown, but there's still very much a lot of concern. And so when you go into, say, large office buildings, they're still scanning everybody. They're taking the infrared thermal imaging and they're looking at it, making sure nobody has a fever. And so that's very different than, say, in the US, where you can't really discriminate and you can't force these people to prove a negative that they're not infected or that they don't have a fever. So again, real estate, they've come out very clearly in defense of the real estate industry, saying you guys are essential. You can't do showings, but you can do everything else. You can have property inspectors going on site. You can do title companies. You can do escrow, you can do banking. All these things can stay open to support the real estate industry. Legal, accounting, they're just very, very broad, and everybody, it's up to the discretion of the lawyer in the best interest of their client, whether it's an essential or there would be a harm, super broad. And it's kind of funny. I think there is actually, though, a blacklist in the FAQ of categories such as amusement parks and nail salons, country clubs, and then the most famous one is gyms. You cannot go to a fitness center. You can't work out in a group setting. And so, other than that fairly short list, everybody else is allowed to work and is declared an essential business. So for the counties that haven't put out such detailed FAQs, I'm looking at you, Collin County, they are going to be governed by the state. And so what that means is there has been language, from Abbott and from the county judge saying, we are limiting to essential businesses only. And Collin County has not defined essential no more than what the state has said. And the state language is pretty broad, and it's not detailed, and it's not meant to give a guide. It's just giving you broad categories and not actual industries, I would say. In Collin County, they did actually specifically name emergency personnel, so your ambulance drivers, your fire, police, and that sort of thing. So those are the only ones that are explicitly named in Collin. But it becomes a test for everybody else to decide, well, am I going to look to Dallas? Am I going to look to the state? Am I going to look to my own interpretation? Or hopefully you'll consult your lawyer and come up with a strategy that fits, what I think is a logical balance of risk versus benefit. So what are the penalties? When I put these up, I thought they were onions at first, but what are the penalties? What are these bad mushrooms? $1,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. This is Chapter 81. There's a very strong statutory background for this, and I don't think there'd be any problems enforcing it. There may be a factual issue of whether that person truly did violate, but the penalties are clear and the authority is clear that they can do this once it's declared, a disaster, yada, yada. In addition, Dallas has put very prominently, dial 311. This is their tattle line. They want to encourage people to snitch on their neighbors. And I don't know if it's in the benefit of health or if this is, a revenue scheme, but they do that. It can be $1,000 fine per violation, per person, per day. So if you're looking at a business and people came to work for a few days, and it could be $10,000 right there, and then somebody snitches on you next week and says, well, we've been coming to work for the last 2 weeks, you can see how the numbers would ratchet up pretty quickly. And there's some issues about notice and who would be liable, but you don't want to get in that mess. I really counsel my clients, avoid this confrontation if you can. On the other hand, I do have, clients that are in quasi construction, remodeling. I think that one was a big question. I'm doing rehabs, I'm replacing stuff, but I'm not doing new construction per se. Do I still qualify? And I've largely advised those people that, yes, you would be. So here, if you're operating, if you are an essential business, or if you are doing these types of things, limit workers, the total number of workers. Try not to put them in enclosed small spaces. You may have to put people in conference rooms, that sort of thing. And Dallas County, again, they've put out specific instructions on contractors and workers at construction sites. I haven't seen these being enforced. We're out, exercising and running by these different construction sites. And to me, they're just doing business as usual. So for them, they're not too concerned. They'd rather really just work. They may or may not be covering their face, but that's the only precautions they're doing. They're very close contact to these other people. Again, essential retail workers, you can take their temperature before arriving to work. I don't know if it says must, but maybe that's a permissive. So I think that's kind of what we're at in terms of these major questions. But the real issue I would say is sitting down and asking, where is your business based? Where are your employees based? And where are your clients based? Because it's an important question about how you're going to enforce that. And if an employee doesn't want to come to work, can you terminate them for those concerns? I think a lot of people, a lot of my larger clients are maybe looking to use this as a chance to kind of cull their employment base. And I won't say it's an excuse, but they're saying, hey, unless you're protected by this modification of the FMLA, which gives protections to people who are infected by COVID-19 or treating somebody who is infected by COVID-19, and their job now has to be preserved for them when they come back. there's not a whole lot of protection. It's still at will, and if they're required to work and they don't work, then that just becomes that problem. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps up my main thing. So cross county, we talked about. Really, I think look at what you're doing and how you can change that and put into place better policies that are compliant with your county specific regulations. Same for the employees. Make a policy. Maybe you need to update everybody's address. Maybe daily you make them certify a form about their COVID infections, something like that. There should be a change in how you do business, and it's not just business as normal, because I definitely would think there potentially could be liability for an employer who doesn't make any changes or doesn't evaluate the pros and benefits and just has all his employees come into work as usual. Somebody's sick and the whole office gets infected, and God forbid, somebody passes away. You as an employer are issuing commands, and you need to be very clear. Are you required to come into the office? Am I requiring you to work? Yes or no? And knowing what your options are and knowing what your rights really will be important in this ever-changing landscape. And I will say, as a reverse preface to everything, they're doing all of this very haphazard. They're disseminating information through tweets. They're doing it through press conferences. They're releasing very skimpy documents that don't have a ton of detail. So like our FAQ, that didn't come out until 10 days after the initial stay in place and after the initial order of essential businesses only. Then they came out with an FAQ after every single industry started banging on their door saying, hey, we want to be able to say we're essential. We got to stay open. We got to stay open. So I also have some of the links. Not sure the best way if you guys want that. DallasCounty.org/COVID-19, CollinCountyTexas.gov, healthcare services, and then, just the gov.texas.gov website. But I can email those out if people want to look. That's where I'm getting my primary information, after I get a tweet. So I'm basically like looking for a tweet and then going to those resources to see what they publish. But yeah, do you guys have any questions?
Ron, just one quick question. Who are you following on Twitter for this information besides Clay Jenkins?
Clay Jenkins and some of the news reporters too. I can't say the networks off the top of my head, but some of the other news outlets are tweeting.
I have heard Meredith Land's Instagram is a good source as well.
Okay, I will check that out. I have an Instagram account, so yeah. And then Abbott tweets, so you can go directly to the source there.
Ron, can you? Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat what you said in the beginning regarding the counties and the physical regulations where you physically are? You made a key statement there. Can you rehash that one out? You might know a little bit about my business. I'm headquartered in Collin. I have both Dallas County and Collin County employees that live in both counties, and then I have clients that we serve, kind of like Amazon, but we stay there for 45 minutes.
Right.
So it's a one-on-one service setting. It's a home delivered one-on-one service setting, and it does cross county lines, and then different employees have different levels of comfort with doing that or not. We as employees and as a company, we've taken the stance of moving everyone to video chat appointments. We are blessed in that we have a few people that are actually, like, we're actually making sales and bringing on new clients. Not nearly as many as normal. And I'm not even sure if we should go out to their homes in an in-person meeting to set them up as clients and then transition them to video chat. So where I have some employees that are willing to do it, and I have some clients that are willing to do it, and they are much happier if we would. But I'm not sure it's worth making the 5% happy when the other 95% are taking the super safe road. But I don't know if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes to individual questions and whether you continue to do business and whether you do quote house calls. It's going to take a new policy. You've got to evaluate the risk. You've got to identify them and then put forward a consistent new policy that says this is how we're going to do it. We've evaluated the pros and cons, and this is the safest way that we've, as management, has decided to move forward. As a business attorney and in-house counsel, we've got to make business decisions all the time, and there's always going to be some amount of risk. Here, I think we've identified the compliance risk. There's definitely some interaction there on the compliance side. I think we could kind of qualify yours under health services. I mean, I think that one's fair to say. It's not too much of a stretch, right? I mean, and health categories are specifically mentioned. So we could do it.
Yeah, on that note, in fact, I know everyone has their view on essential. Yeah, we had a client that we were serving. For those that don't know, we do natural health and fitness home delivered one-on-one settings. It's a lot of corrective stuff, not just we don't serve your 30-year-olds trying to get six packs and stuff. We're in that 40 to 80-year-old. But yeah, we had one client that we were working with, very, very unhealthy, that they went on lockdown, and she actually didn't work with us for about a month and a half and ended up dying, not of COVID-19, but of a stroke. Wow. Which is the exact kind of things that we work to prevent. Yeah. So it is interesting.
Yeah, what I would recommend, we can connect offline and just work through the process, but the overall structure is you need to be able to identify all the risks. Where are they coming from? On the one hand, we have a compliance risk, we have a county, order risk, we have state compliance, and then you have the health risk, you have the COVID-19 liability. It is not a stretch to say that a business owner has liability for making his employees do house calls, and then those employees come back and spread it to their families. So as long as you understand that's what the risk is, you need to come up with a policy and a system that does its best to mitigate those risks, and then you can decide whether you want to put it forward. I'm happy to chat with you after this, but that's essentially the structure, and we'll go through which counties qualify, which employees can qualify, what can they do, what can they not do. And if you do that, it's going to show, not say a court or a jury, but it's going to demonstrate to anybody else that, okay, well, they were careful about this, they made some evaluations. In hindsight, maybe it wasn't enough, but they didn't just keep waltzing on saying business as usual, let's just go get our money, let's force our employees out there. And that's what's going to ultimately, make the difference for your employees and for your company as you grow. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Appreciate that.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you to my friends for coming. Yeah, I will, I'll edit this and see you on YouTube.